Austin 316 says I just whipped your ass.
And what's it gonna do?
It doesn't matter how you're doing. Woo! Wheeling, dealing, living right, jet flying.
Can you dig it, sucker?
Would you please shut the hell up?
You don't know what hard times are, Daddy.
The cream will rise to the top, oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Look at the human rubble.
What up, what up? Welcome to episode 59 of Keep the Kayfabe. I'm Mike, sitting here with my boys, ready to talk some wrestling. We are coming off a phenomenal weekend participating at Crusherfest happening down in South Milwaukee this past weekend. The boys and I did a live sit-down with living legends Greg Gagne, Jim Brunzell, and the director of Crusherfest, Peggy Clark. And we were so lucky to sit down with them and have a great chat. We got some great stories to share with you. But before we get to that, let's get acclimated with the boys real quick. Over in Glendale, somebody who keeps it regal, Steve Grobschmidt. How are you, Grubby?
Hey, yo. The pleasure is all yours, Chico.
It sure is. Good to see you, Steve. Thanks for joining us here tonight. Let's cruise down to Bayview real quick. Talk to my guy who keeps it freshly squeezed, Mr. Matt Michelson. How are you, Matt?
Oh, yeah, keep the kayfabe, yeah.
Oh, he's feeling good tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Love to hear it. And we don't have one member of our team with us tonight, Charlie Michael. He has another underwear modeling gig to attend to, so it's just going to be us three tonight. But yeah, let's get to this great interview that we have with Peggy Clark, Jim Brunzell, and Greg Gagne. What up, what up? Welcome to a very special episode of Keep the Kayfabe. I'm Mike, sitting here with my boys and some awesome guests here at Crusherfest in South Milwaukee. Let's hear it, guys. Thanks for coming out to the show. All right, as I mentioned, we got some awesome guests with us here today. We have the director, Peggy Clark of Crusherfest. Thank you, Peggy, for joining us. But also we have Greg Gagne and Jim Brunzell, living legends, professional wrestlers. Thank you, gentlemen, so much for being with us.
Thank you for having
today.
us.
Thanks for having us.
It's a real honor. Thank you, guys. And Peggy, please, can you tell us how Crusherfest came about and what was the idea behind setting this all up?
Yeah, so the interesting thing is 2 doors down on Milwaukee Avenue, we were out. I'm an alderman in South Milwaukee. We were out after our December meeting, and we had a new city attorney, big wrestling fan. None of us knew that. And he said, hey, what would you think if I did a bronze statue of the Crusher, like the Fonz? And I'm like, oh, my God, I would love that. Like, that was part of my childhood. Yeah. Well, everyone thought we were crazy. Everyone thought he was crazy. And so he set up a Facebook page, and 3 months later, we had over $50,000. He thought it was going to take years, and it would be his legacy. He's like, so when I'm done being a lawyer, then hopefully I'll have enough money to kick in, and then we can have the statue. So 3 months later. So then what happened was we raised $17,000 more than the statue. So we said, hey, let's have a festival. So voila, here we are.
That's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the man of the hour for this whole thing is the Crusher.
Absolutely.
And, I mean, this is, I guess, an open question for everybody. What did the Crusher mean to you?
Well, I think growing up, watching the AWA, everybody knew who the Crusher was. I mean, he was so bold, and his character was so incredibly associated with Milwaukee, you know, and I became real good friends with him, and he's just, many people don't realize this, but he was a very sensitive guy. He loved his family very much, and he was always on guard, you know, as his part as a professional wrestler to protect himself in the business, and that was his key goal, and, you know, he's a legend. Great guy, too.
Most of the time, he was a great guy. No, Crusher was a lot of fun. He was an inspiration. I remember back, I had a match where I took Crusher for my partner in Milwaukee against Bockwinkel and Bobby Heenan. And during the interview, Marty Neal was doing the interview, and all of a sudden, Crusher turned and laid a forearm on me. And I went right out of the camera and hit the floor. and he didn't think I'd hit him back, but I got a shot in on him. I guess that's one of my good memories. And then there was a lot of great Crusher stories. And no, it was Crusher and the Mad Dog wrestling in a cage match in the Mecca.
Nice.
And Jim and I had finished our match, and up in the Mecca, the locker rooms are all separated. We're walking down the hall, and Crusher and Mad Dog got this cage match coming up, and we see Crusher in the locker room, pint of whiskey, whoosh, down it goes. So we walked down a little farther, there's Mad Dog, pint of whiskey, down it went. We looked at each other and said, we better go down and watch this baby. 'Cause they didn't like each other.
Oh.
And Mad Dog went out and got in the ring, and he's doing his jumping around and all that, and the cage is up. And here comes the Crusher down, and the people are going crazy. And he goes to step into the ring, and Mad Dog slammed the door on his head, and that big steel bar in the middle hit him right in the forehead, busted him open, and Mad Dog started just beating the crap out of him. And now they locked the door, and the fans, you know, he was so established here in Milwaukee, and he was a hero. The people started climbing the cage to get in and help him. And Mad Dog saw this, and he looked up, and he took off running, and he had hit one rope, and the people go flying off. People in the third and fourth row were catching him. Then he'd run to the other side. They're flying off. Then all four corners he hit, and people flying off this cage. Well, we were laughing our tails off up there watching this thing. But you know, that's what he meant to the city of Milwaukee.
Yeah.
You know, so much different wrestling today. When we wrestled, the personalities, people either got into your personality and liked you, or they got into your personality and didn't like you. And they emotionally got attached to you. But there's no emotion in wrestling anymore. It's just they don't learn how to put on holds or get out of holds. They don't know submission holds. It's boom, 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 boom. And I don't know how the people can actually follow it or really even get into a personality. So.
I think he really hit on exactly kind of why the Crusher is important to us and them. You know, they're real. You know, it was real, and you really felt invested in what they were doing. And for me, I was one of 40-some cousins. My grandparents were very poor. They couldn't take all of us anywhere, so it was wrestling. You know, we would gather, and my grandpa was a sheriff, and I think you guys wrestled out in Waukesha at the arena, and I was there. And, you know, they were reachable. You know, that was the thing, and from being here with them this weekend, I probably gonna cry when they leave, because it became real instantly, because they're not fake. Like, that's the difference. Like, they are, every person they talked to, they were like invested in them, and it was amazing to watch. This has been an honor.
That's great.
Thank you, Peggy.
Jim, did you wrestle with the Crusher? I mean, are there any matches that came to mind?
You know, I can't really think of any that I was in a team. I don't know if we were in a six-man team or tag or what, but I was, you know, ever present at a lot of his matches. And, you know, I traveled with him, and he was, you know, he was the Crusher, you know, 24 hours a day. And he lived that life, and he treated everybody with respect, you know, both fans and different personalities, and he was just, you know, an all-around great guy, you know. And it's funny because, you know, times change just like that, you know.
Oh, sure.
I mean, all of a sudden, you know, Greg and I were young kids in the locker room, and now, you know, we're in our 70s, and we're looking at some of these wrestlers and thinking, holy Jesus.
What else?
I won't say what I'm going to say after that. But there's, you know, the problem with wrestling today in watching TV is there's no real story being told, and everybody wants to be strong because they think if they're strong, people are going to like them. And the problem is that if both teams are strong or both individuals are strong, you're not going to get through to the audience that you're trying to draw to, you know. And then, you know, you take a guy like Bobby Heenan, you know. I mean, honest to God, the people hated, they loved to hate him, and he just, you know, he was incredible. He was a genius at what he did.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, you know, they hated him, and they loved to hate him. and he was by far the greatest personality of my career all the way around.
Right.
I mean, he was so sharp like that. I mean, telling one story, I remember he used to drink quite a bit, and we came back from Denver one time, and Bobby had about 2 or 3 wrestlers that he managed. So Vern and Wally were going through the TV, and Bobby leaned over their shoulder like that to see where his guys were positioned in the telecast. So he's leaning over there, and Vern looked up at him and he says, "Heenan, you've been drinking it." Bobby looked at him and he says, "You can't smell vodka," and he walked away.
He was an exceptional personality, and he was the same in the ring as he was out of the ring. Out of the ring, they were telling a story at the airport that they were going to Japan. It was Bobby, Nick Bockwinkel, Ray Stevens. And what Bobby used to do, when he'd get to the airport, he'd have Bockwinkel and Stevens push him in a wheelchair. So they'd get down to the gate so they could get on early. So in Japan, they either had you in first class or business class, and this time they were in business class, and Bobby wanted to get up in first class. So here's how the story went. They push him down. They ask for who wants to get on early, needs help. Here comes Heenan, Bockwinkel, and Stevens. They roll him down to the cart, and he gets out of the cart, and he says, "Oh, guys, thank you very much." And then he trips himself and does a flip into the airplane. Well, the pilots jump out of the cockpit. The flight attendants run over to him. They pick him. "Oh, my back, my back, my back." "Well, what can we do for you?" "Oh, I think if you could put us up first class, it would be great." So sure enough, the 3 of them got up first class. So I hope we got some ladies out there, but I'll tell the story anyhow. So go ahead. Are you sure?
They're liberated.
Right. So Bobby tells the steward, he says, "My boys, I make sure, we got these big matches in Japan. We have to get them fed. So in case we're sleeping or something, just, pull up the tray and wake us up or whatever we have to do." Flight attendant says, "Okay." So a little later, here comes the flight attendant with the meals, and there's Bobby sound asleep, and he's got the newspaper over his lap and the table down. So the lady pulls the table up. She pulls the newspaper off, and Bobby had his zipper open and his thing hanging out. And she laid out this big scream through the whole airplane, and then he's jumping up. "Oh, gee, oh, man, I'm so sorry. Oh, my God, how did that happen?"
Like it was an accident.
Yeah, it was an accident. So a little later, he calls the flight attendant. He says, "I want to really apologize to you. I fell asleep, and I don't know how that happened." But and she says, "Oh, it's okay, Mr. Heenan. You're okay." And he said, "Would you do me a favor?" He said, we have a friend in the back, a Japanese fella. It's his birthday, Mr. Okichimpo. Would you wish him a happy birthday?" So she gets on the deal, and she said, "I'd like to wish Mr. Okichimpo from Bobby Heenan a happy birthday." And all the Japanese in the back of the plane are laughing their butts off. Okichimpo meant Large Johnson. So that's the kind of stuff he did. He was a smart ass in the ring, out of the ring, on the mic. He was unbelievable. And as far as in the ring, he wasn't a great wrestler, but he gave the people what they wanted. And he was very, very talented.
But Greg, that's what you said. That you were real.
Yeah, I mean that's
there wasn't anything
our personalities were the same in the ring as they were out of the ring.
Yeah.
There's just tremendous stories about all these guys, the Crusher, Mad Dog Bashan, some of the things that happened outside the ring. There was a right here in Milwaukee. My dad and Vern and Crusher wrestled a tag team match, and after the match, they went down to a local establishment with the promoter Dennis Hilgart, and Dennis was one of the greatest wrestling promoters anywhere. He ran all of Wisconsin, parts of Illinois, San Francisco, Las Vegas. He put all those things together, and he was unbelievable. So he's taken Crusher and Vern down to this local establishment, and there's 3 guys in suits standing outside. And as they walk by him, the one guy says, "Crusher, you're a phony."
Oh, boy.
And he turned and looked at him, and Dennis said, "No, let's go back in. Let's just get in here, leave it go." They went back in, and Crusher got cut up that night and had a big bandage on his head. So they're in there quite a while, and they come back out. These 3 guys are still there. 3 guys in suits. The guy says, "Hey, Crusher, didn't you hear me? I think you're a phony." And that blood, and he hit him on the head, and that blood came pouring out, and Crusher grabbed him by the neck with one hand and shoved him right up the wall. And the guy was about 6'2", and he probably weighed about 220. And he was going to kill him. They had to pull him off. The guy was getting purple, and the other 2 made a move, and Vern decked one, and the other one backed off. And the Crusher let him down, and then Dennis got him out of there. Found out there were 3 guys from the FBI.
Oh.
Yeah. But they never pressed any charges.
They were smart.
But the Crusher, I tell you, he was so strong. I mean, one hand had the guy by the throat, and the guy weighed about 220, and up he went. So, those were some things that happened outside the ring when people thought they could take you on.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna get to a question shortly about modern wrestling. But I think we're gonna get there right now. But yeah, I mean, that was a question like that, or an accusation like that. Guys in that era didn't take kindly to that, whereas now everybody kind of knows. But still, it's a different
style. I mean, the AWA was the premier league. Yes. The talent in there was phenomenal. Mm-hmm. It was always the best talent in the country. And we wrestled all across Canada, from Vancouver to Montreal, from Winnipeg to St. Louis, all the way to the West Coast. And Vern always wanted the guys to have time off, so we usually got the whole month of May and the first 2 weeks of June off.
Nice.
Other places, the guys were wrestling all the time.
Yeah.
But we were talking the other night, and it was very interesting because the McMahons ran the East Coast, and it was a different style of wrestling. To them, it was all big characters, personalities, and they didn't have to know how to wrestle. If you wrestled in the AWA, you had to know how to wrestle. You have to know how to get in a hold, out of a hold, and Vern trained us 6 hours a day, 6 days a week for 3.5, 4 months. And we were pretty well schooled when we got out there and could handle ourselves. So, and the difference today, and McMahon took it over. To him, to me, it's a circus. Here's the whole Harlem Globetrotters coming to town. And let's just entertain the people. And he wants big personalities, and he's created that. He's done an excellent job doing that. But they've lost the whole concept of, to me, what professional wrestling really was back in the day. Done. Done. I'm out of here.
Jim,
Drop the mic. Jim, did you want to weigh in on the just modern wrestling in general and what?
Vince McMahon has created. He didn't like what our wrestling represented to him. He wanted to create opportunity for him to make money by promoting superstars. So all he did was put these people up, and Hulk Hogan, he couldn't have done it without Hulk Hogan. Sure. Hulk Hogan was with us in the AWA,
right,
and did incredible. And then when he went to the WWE, things, all of a sudden, like I mentioned yesterday, all the different territories, there's 26 territories, all of a sudden there's one.
Right.
And you got 60 guys working 3 towns a night. And it constantly, nothing made any sense. Like, maybe Crusher would have a match here with somebody, Mad Dog, and then somebody what might interfere. And then the next card in Milwaukee, they'd have Crusher and a partner against Mad Dog and a partner. And Vince McMahon never did that. What he'd do is he'd bring Hulk Hogan out to the West Coast, and he'd have a decent match with somebody, and then the next time they were in California, he had a totally different card. Nothing made any sense. And what he wanted to do is he wanted to project superstars, and that's why you saw all that incredible amount of residual. You saw the kids with the little boxes, the lunch boxes and the T-shirts and the hats. And, Hulk Hogan was making $50,000 a week in royalties.
Wow.
And he was the number one paid athlete in 1985. He made $10 million. And in 1985, he had his a picture on the cover of Sports Illustrated, and it said "Sports Top Banana," and it was Hulk Hogan.
Yeah.
And Vince couldn't have done what he did without Hulk, and that's why Hulk is still, lingering on, even though he's had horrible surgeries and he's beat up like a son of a gun. But the people still, he's very much what Crusher meant, to Milwaukee and the AWA in a different way, but he is, to the WWE, WWF, and the world of wrestling.
Yeah, and I mean, in his case, he's a household name, pop icon. I mean, it transcended wrestling.
Yeah, he's
Absolutely.
Something that I did want to ask, because and it just kind of ties with like modern versus eras gone by, but the whole Team Challenge series, that people remember that for lots of different reasons. But what's interesting to me, and I've heard people talk about this, is how at the time with sort of like the digitized crowd and that seemed really crazy to people. But then you go through a pandemic where they had to do things because there was no crowds, and suddenly it didn't seem so outlandish or so. Do you have any kind of top memories of like what you guys were going for that?
Well, it was just look what they're doing now. What did the WWE just have last week? A draft. Okay, that's what we did back there. It was a draft. But it was called the challenge. But they drafted different guys on the teams.
And yeah.
So we were way ahead of the time with it. But the people didn't quite get it at the time.
It was too out there for them at the time.
Everybody's interested in the basketball draft, the football draft. They're into the draft. Back then, it was, people weren't that into it. But they're doing it now, and it's working for them.
Well, just look at the social media and look how many websites are covering pro wrestling. And I mean, you go boom, boom, and all of a sudden 5 of them punch up, and in the morning, all of a sudden you'll say so and so, fell down and now he's in the hospital, and boom, boom, boom. The next thing you know, all the different websites are covering it.
Yeah, and speaking of that, it's interesting because just I'm in my late 40s, and I grew up with the AWA. My dad, by the way, I told my dad yesterday who we were interviewing, and oh my God, he lit up. He was like bringing out, I didn't have to do any research. He brought up so many things, like he was.
So we didn't mean that much to you, and you've got us here.
No,
on the
absolutely.
Show. It was your dad. Why isn't he here doing
Oh, I
this
guess I
interview?
walked into that one, didn't I? But I remember as a kid, it's like you watched wrestling every week, whatever, and then you'd have to wait until the next week to find out stuff. Now and then, there was the 900 numbers in the 90s, and now, like you said, social media. It's almost impossible for anything to be a surprise anymore because it's just out there, and wrestlers are out there, sometimes in character, sometimes not on social media. It's just a whole weird, different dynamic than even 20 years ago.
Well, we've been. And you talk about that, and it's really interesting because I had a call about 6 months ago from a gentleman by the name of Steve Rosenthal. And Steve was the first man who worked for Dremco Toys, and he came out with the action figures of the professional wrestlers. And he first went to Vince McMahon, and he went 5 different times to him. Vince wanted him to change the contract, upfront money, this and that. So he finally got to the deal. He goes in there, and McMahon throws a magazine at him. He says, "Do you know these people?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, I just signed with them." It cost Steve about $100,000.
Oof.
And he came to the AWA. He got the action figures going, and we were the first ones that had the wrestling action figures on the market. And he ran it for 8 years and did phenomenal. And retired. 6 months ago, he calls me up. He said, "I've got some partners. They're all CEOs and presidents of toy companies, and they've been doing research. They spent 14 hours on the phone with collectors. What do you think the collectors wanted? Old-time wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we're going to give them.
Awesome.
They're coming out with very soon with dolls or action figures that will be starting with 2 men from the 50s, 1 from the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. They do 6 at a time. And then they've got other merchandise that nobody has on the market. And I think it's going to be a real hit because everywhere we go, they talk about old-time wrestling. They talk about the Crusher, Vern Gagne, Mad Dog Vachon, Killer Kowalski, Lou Thez, Hans Schmidt. You guys might not even remember some of these names.
I don't.
But they were the... Oh, you do too.
I do.
They were the guys that really started on the network TV in 1950 out of Chicago. And they were the ones that set all the groundwork for wrestling today. Pat O'Connor was another one on there. Tiny Mills, Kinji Shibuya. Angelo Poffo, Randy Savage's dad. He was in fact, I remember coming to Milwaukee with my dad. I was about 8 years old, and he was wrestling Angelo Poffo, and he had his manager, I forget what his name was, but it was my first experience at it, and they had a full-fledged riot that night. And it was unbelievable. I was 8 years old, a little scared, but the police from the back took me in the back. But they had to control it. But, again, that's what these guys did, the emotion that the people got. You were either your hero or they hated you. And you don't have that too much anymore, I don't think.
Well, Peggy, Greg, Jim, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to sit here and talk wrestling with us. Peggy,
is this too boring? Are you cutting us off already?
No.
Hey, you want to keep? I said 5 more minutes. You want to keep talking?
No. We're kidding. We did one the other night with a guy named Barry Rose. It went 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got to protect my boys.
Yeah, we know your time is precious, so we feel really lucky that you guys got a chance to sit down and talk with the fans. Is there anything else you want to say to the listeners and the fans that came out this weekend?
No, just all the fans that showed up for the Crusherfest. They were fantastic. It was the greatest group of people we've been around in a long time.
Yes.
True story.
Beautiful people.
Awesome.
Thanks for remembering us.
Right.
All weekend, all they kept saying was, "Wow, this is amazing. Wow, this is amazing." So, yeah, you guys brought it.
Yeah, it's truly been an amazing event. Thank you all so much for joining us for a live taping of Keep the Kayfabe. You can find us on Spotify, iTunes, and Google Podcasts. Once again, thank you so much for joining us. And a little piece of advice for everybody out there. This is our saying: stay humble, stay hungry, and stay hard. Triple H, baby.
Oh.
Keep those and you'll be just fine.
All right. We're in our 70s, but we still got it.
That's right. Awesome. All right, let's give him a big hand.
Thank you, guys.
Well, boys, what can we say? That was so much fun hearing about these great wrestling stories from the AWA. We feel so lucky, and we had a great crowd out there too, so we want to thank all the people that came out to hear the interview live. What else can we say, boys?
Yeah, it was I always we joke, but it's the truth that Charlie and I are they represent older folks on the podcast. So like I said in the interview, I'm in my late 40s, and I've told this story when we had the podcast about getting into wrestling. What was your first memory? Is I grew up with the AWA, and I watched it with my dad every Sunday morning, and it's just, yeah. So not, Greg Gagne, I remember quite a bit. And I remember, like a lot of stuff going on with him, but Jim Brunzell in particular, it's not only did I grow up with him, but he had a memorable run on the WWF. I think he was there for 9 years as part of the Killer Bees, and then I think he was singles for a while. I always remember him being I think both guys were always good guys too, but and they were good guys in person, weren't they? I mean, they were a breeze to interview, super engaged, cool. Super, just, you could tell those dudes just love telling stories. And I don't know. I mean, we're modest podcasters, and when you talk to people like that, it makes our job easy because they just went with some awesome stories.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually caught up with Greg a little bit after the interview, and I just wanted to thank him again for participating on the show. Because, Steve, to your point, yeah, both guys were great. Greg, Jim, if you guys are listening back to this, thank you again so much. We honestly could not be more grateful for the stories you shared. Really humbling experience for us. Unlike Steve and Charlie, I was not an AWA guy growing up. I'm a little bit younger than the rest of the podcasters, but I can tell you, after hearing some of the stories, I'm definitely going to go back and watch some AWA content. And actually, Mike and I were talking about this earlier today. Just the sound of it, and I think one of the things that I really like about it is it adds another element of realism. And I think we heard this a couple times from Peggy Clark over the course of the podcast. And I think that's what really differentiates it from other products out there. You know, we heard from Greg and Jim talking about their experience with the WWF versus the AWA. So I personally want to go back and watch some of this content. For those of you new listeners who maybe haven't heard this podcast before, you probably don't recognize my voice. I was the guy sitting there on the mixing board, which I could not have had a better seat at this interview. And it was kind of nice, you know, not having to actually kick back and ask questions. I was able to just kind of sit there, take in these stories, and really experience what these guys had to talk about. really interesting stuff. Like I said, I've never been a watcher of more vintage pro wrestling, but I can tell you just after hearing some of these stories, even it really makes me want to take a second look at it, go back, check out some of these matches. We have talked about this before on the show. I was a huge fan of Demolition, one of the big tag teams in WWF in the early 90s, late 80s, and the Killer Bees had a good run feuding with Demolition at one point. So, I'm definitely familiar with that tag team. It was super cool just to hear from Jim some of his stories. What more is there to say, right? We heard so many great things in the interview. Just again, great experience. Could not be more grateful for the stories those guys shared with us.
I thought, like if you're somebody that's only into modern wrestling, you've probably heard lots of quote unquote old timers kind of bash the current product. But what I liked about how they answered the question to us is how it's, is sort of critical of the modern wrestling, but really was just talking about elements that are timeless. And, the three of us, or the four of us, when Charlie's here, we review AEW a lot. So we're obviously very much invested in modern wrestling. But, you can see some of those points, like heels are hard to come by nowadays because, guys do kind of want to be liked. And it's like Adam Cole is amazing, but he's barely a heel because he's got a chant. And you know what I mean? Like people love him. And it's not a rip on him. I think he's an awesome character, but it's like, MJF is probably one of the only true heels in wrestling right now. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I just think the spirit of what they said was that it was just people you cared about and people you invested in, and like Bobby the Brain Heenan, people would just love to hate him. And I think, it's like there's not too many guys quite like that nowadays. It's different. It needs to be different. People probably wouldn't watch the old stuff, but I don't know. It was interesting, and I thought the way they answered that was a nice balance of not being super negative, but kind of making a point.
Right.
Yeah. On a slightly different note, I do also want to just again mention Peggy Clark, the co-founder of Crusherfest, and we just heard her talk on the interview. Peggy could not have been more nice, more helpful, more willing to have us on the show, more willing to have us participate in Crusherfest, I should say. And I really do want to extend her a huge thank you for giving us this opportunity. And, even talking to Peggy off camera, outside the interview, nicest person I've talked to in quite some time. And it's really interesting to hear her tell the stories about, growing up with her family, how pro wrestling was their entertainment at the time. And, how emotionally invested she was, especially in pro wrestling. And that clearly translates into her passion for this festival because as an alderman for the city of South Milwaukee, you got to step back and think for a second, what makes you really want to do the work it takes to put on this festival? Because I can tell you guys, and we talked about this a little bit before we started recording, it's a lot of work to market anything at a live event. And, we put a lot of time into preparing for this and obviously bringing you this content this week, but just scale that up. And that's the work Peggy has to do. Not only are there vendors and podcasts like us there, you have live wrestling as well. So having to coordinate all the talent, the physical, ring, the seats, the tents, everything. Peggy went through a ton of work to make this happen, and we could not be more grateful, and we are really excited for Crusherfest 2022.
Yeah, thank you, Matt, for that, because I wanted to make sure to pump Peggy's tires as well. She was so nice, and we're so grateful for her invitation for us to participate the way that we did. And we are really looking forward to next year because from what it sounds like, it was a smashing success. And boys, real quick before we talk about what else happened later that night, I wanted to extend a big thank you on behalf of me to you boys. Matt, you were an amazing sound technician for this, bringing it to the fans listening, to what it sounded in our headphones, to what fans are listening to now, that interview. You mixed it. You did a phenomenal job, so great job there. And Steve, way to drive the bus on this. I know this was kind of your era, and I'm so happy that you got a chance to talk to these legends one-on-one, and I just thought you did a phenomenal job. So it was really fun for us, Keep the Kayfabe boys, to do this all together, and it was a really team effort, but I just extra gold star for you both, too. So, yeah.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, and one more thing I do want to remember, I want to wish Mr. Oki Chimpo a happy birthday.
Can't forget about
happy
Mr.
Birthday.
Yep, happy birthday, Mr. Oki Chimpo. Awesome. Yes, well, Crusherfest was a smashing success. They are going to be back again next year. And we hope we are too. Maybe we'll have our own tent and maybe have a panel going all day doing interviews where people can sit down and listen to great interviews and stories while they eat the great food from the many amounts of food trucks that are there and beverages that are being poured. And let's talk about it. I mean, the beer selection there on tap was unbelievable. We got a lot of good variety from a lot of Wisconsin breweries. The service was great, and everybody was taken care of. Even going over to the food truck district, there was probably 6 or 7 food trucks to choose from. It's only going to get better from here on out. But, I mean, Matt and I and his fiancée, Becky, chose to hang out a little later and close down the festival. It was so awesome. We went to the music tent and actually saw a band that was a polka hip-hop band, Steve. I wish you would have stuck around because you would have loved it. I don't know if you're a Weird Al Yankovic fan or anything.
You have to be.
Oh, you got to be because he's a genius, right? Well, this dude was playing an electric accordion, and then there was a dude freestyling, and then there was another dude freestyling, but he also had like a mask on that kind of looked like Thor with a drummer. And these guys were like unbelievable. Being a proud Milwaukeean myself and being pretty up to date on the live music scene, I am shocked that I've never heard of these guys. I can't remember what their name was. You can look at it. They performed at 9:00 at the Music Fen at Crusherfest, but it was polka hip hop, and my God, was it fun!
It was so fun. And actually, I did look up the band yesterday. For those of our listeners out there, I'll save you a few minutes. November Criminals is the name of the band. You can actually find them on Spotify. They do have 2 albums out there.
Perfect.
Great music, really interesting live. And I can tell you there was anyone from, 8-year-old kids running around, jumping, dancing around to 65-year-old men who, probably shouldn't be dancing to hip hop, dancing around as well. So really good music for all ages, really unique as well. Mike and I had an awesome time.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of great people watching, obviously, as well. I do want to give a shout out to the beer selection Mike mentioned. That was actually part of the European Beer Gardens, which is immediately next to and actually was part of Crusherfest for this event. So European Beer Gardens, I believe it's managed and owned by Brittany Rosales, James Moran, both South Milwaukee famous people, business owners, entrepreneurs. Those 2 did a fantastic job making sure that everything was set up. Really complimented Crusherfest well. So shout out to those guys.
And you know what? I participate in a lot of live events. With my own personal business, and I've been to a lot and seen a lot. But I think Crusherfest is number 1 on my list now. I had so much fun, and I can't wait to be back next year. It's going to be bigger and better than ever. And thank you all for coming out and seeing us live. And I hope you enjoyed the interview. Make sure you like Crusherfest and keep an eye out for more updates. And I think we're going to have Peggy back to give us some updates of what's coming up, which will be great. So,
Absolutely.
Okay, so there's only one thing left here on Keep the Kayfabe, and that is promo of the week. And we're going to send it over to Steve Grobschmidt because this great promo actually hit his inbox, and he is going to share that with us now. What do we got, Steve?
Yes, you're not the only one with contacts, Mike. Gary from Ohio, his good longtime buddy of mine and a regular listener of our show, he made the list. And you know why he made the list? Because his submission is the list of Chris Jericho, which you're going to tee up right now for us.
I mean, listen, Tom, it sounds beautiful, doesn't it? Right? What a great group of friends of Jericho, Tom. I'm Mike, remember? I spent all this time learning your name, Tom, and now you tell me it's Mike. What is it? Is it Mike or Tom? What's your name?
Mike.
Tom.
Mike.
Tom.
Mike.
Mike.
Tom.
See? You don't even know your own name, Mike Tom. And you know what happens when you don't know your own name? You know what happens when you're not even sure who you... Scratch that, you're off the hook. You know what happens, strange, straggling strummer, when you interrupt Chris Jericho? You know what happens, weird, wandering wayfarer, when you walk through Chris Jericho's promo? You know what happens, daffy, drifter, dandy? You just made the list! Thanks, Tom.
And that is a promo.
Oh my
and
God.
I'm happy to have been the guest star promo deliverer this time.
You know, earlier on the show, when we were listening to the interview from Greg and Jim, you know, we did talk a lot about modern wrestling and, you know, the emotional connection, things like that. I think if you look at the landscape of modern wrestling, Chris Jericho is one of the few individuals out there who still manages to connect with the audience on a regular basis, whether he's either a heel or a babyface. And this was actually a part of his heel run where he started to turn babyface just because he was so undeniably entertaining. And the List of Jericho is one of those things I personally will remember for a long time, even though it's only a few years old.
Yeah, you're totally right, Matt. He does give that perfect blend of old school tradition, but he also has his finger like on the beat of the pulse of like what's current, and he's always trying to look for that new thing to go viral, like a little bit of the bubbly, or like you just made the list, you know? Like he's reinvented. He's kind of like the David Bowie of wrestling. I always kind of compare him to. He's reinvented and you know, market himself in so many different ways, but always stay consistently awesome. He's one of my all-time favorites. So thank you so much for submitting that promo of the week. If you want to submit your own promo of the week, you can send it to keepthekayfabe414@gmail.com or hit us up on Instagram or Facebook. Like and subscribe to us there. Send us your promo of the week. And while you're subscribing, subscribe to us on Spotify, iTunes, and Google Podcasts. You're going to love the show. We love you all, and thank you so much again for coming out to see us at Crusherfest. And Steve, is there one more thing you want to add?
There's absolutely one more thing that I would be remiss if I didn't say. I wanted to dedicate this episode to Jerry Johannek, my sister-in-law's brother. He passed away a year and a half ago, and he was a huge fan of Crusherfest. And I just remember when the first one happened a couple years ago, he was like messaging me like, "Oh my God, you got to go to this." And you know, it's a shame he couldn't have made it to the second one. But anyway, I just wanted to give him a shout out.
Well, we're thinking of you, Jerry, and all of you out there. Thank you so much again for giving this podcast life. We look forward to the next episode. And before then, all you got to do is stay humble, stay hungry, and stay hard.
Triple H.
You wanna stop us? You're gonna have to get us on Beagle bed on the border of the sea. Longer than Sykes Beagle, kinda evil. Nah, man, just different so much. So short story, long plan, melodious type flow, but it ain't business. Come get with this. The differences ain't to this. New model, old school, folk and hip hop, produce, cold brew, space one, NTSC, no rules. The prison system, I'd like to rattle the cage. Why do they lock up this before just need to send us to slaves? No erasing this. This is what a racist is. A defender of a system, alternately complacent with you. Chasing this thing they call American dream. A crazy pyramid scheme. Shit, I feel like a meme. On a fascist, be proto-fascist, and Babylon like bad luck. But we get it done. We're like a church full of rattlers. Sounds like rattlers. Rattlers. It's a November criminal. Getting it done like rattlers. It's a November criminal.